this is the white blank canvas of my next painting, which I intend to record over the duration of the making of the painting. Probably up to at least 12 months, maybe shorter, maybe longer, depends on the painting. But I wanted to share this moment before I actually start putting any oil paint on the painting. The blank canvas moment, the white blank canvas moment. It's interesting to think that so many paintings started out like this. A white blank canvas in front of the artist. In fact, if you go to the National Gallery or any gallery, it's interesting to imagine the paintings with nothing on them. They did predominantly start out like this, not necessarily white, but they certainly started out obviously blank. And this has white on it because that's acrylic primer. So far I've made the stretcher. It's 120 centimeters by 120 centimeters. I've put 2 layers of rabbit skin glue to size the linen. It's on linen actually. And I've put 1 layer of white acrylic primer on top, or 2 layers I think. And today I'm just about to put a ground down. Well, ground is a colour that I put down, so I don't work on white. I find white very difficult to work on because it's very reflective. And colours tend to look so different when you put them straight down onto white. Reds and blues clash, all sorts of things can happen when you put them straight onto white. So I like to put a light ground down. I'll probably put down an off grey, not quite sure which grey, I tend to decide as I mix the paint this morning. But once the ground is down, then I'll begin the drawing, but I will explain that in the next clip. This painting that I'm going to make will follow on from 2 other paintings I've recently made of 120 by 120. Probably following woodland themes. I have obviously 2 or 3 ideas what's going to go on the canvas. I wouldn't have stretched it up and put it to these dimensions if I didn't. I'm just awaiting to see the course actually of how the season changes before I put down the initial drawing. I just want to see, coming into winter now, so I just want to see exactly with the subject how it might look. But that just shows the blank canvas prior to any ground. You can actually see on the side, put some masking tape as well to stop fingertips. But you can also see carefully there is still a little bit of linen showing, because I like to have the linen, pure linen showing on the sides. The masking tape's to stop fingerprints. That is before anything actually, any of the action, so to speak, begins. For this canvas, I don't intend to do any more drawing than I've done so far. Normally I might do a little bit more drawing, but I'm pretty confident to go straight in with the paint, straight onto the canvas with the paint. I've basically, it's almost an outline I've done here of the composition, a very basic outline, trying to get a balance between the grey shape in the top right, which is a bush, and the other more structured lines on the left hand side. I've been very, very conscious about having the tree in the middle, like so, and the small space at the bottom, between the bottom of the trunk. I just wanted to have that middle part almost breaking up the middle. So I shall begin painting. Okay, feels a little tropical almost, which is a little bit strange considering it's Viennese wood. Anyway, this is the underdrawing here. Most of what I've put down up to now has been the underdrawing. What I mean by the underdrawing is decisions will have to be made as to the levels of thickness of paint, the size of brush that I will use to make the picture. I'm leaning towards, on this canvas, to, as always with my canvases, to experiment a little bit. Probably going to use quite a thin brush towards the back of the painting, the top left corner, that line with the tree, the top left hand corner, there's a line going from left to right. We do quite thin small brushes up there to very large brushes down the front, but I also intend to thicken the paint down the front. This is looking downhill, so I want to try and get that feeling of going downhill, but play on it a little bit with the green space at the back. So basically lots of drawing here, and lots of underpainting. The next stage, once this is dry, will be to build that up. Some of the tones are just off dark colours, sort of underpainting colours. That's totally intentional, so they come through in the next stage of the painting. good clear morning at the studio now. As you can see, painting has moved on a little bit. It has to be said that I still see most of the work on this painting at the moment as underpainting. Much of the foliage on the left and the right hand side is merely underpainting, putting down some depth that will come in handy later on when I start to thicken the paint up a bit. My plan this morning is to begin thickening that paint, in particular the tree trunk in the centre. Much depends in the painting on this. At the moment it's merely the sketch underneath. In a moment I intend to lay down some quite thick paint, and that will then take me onward and into the painting. The dark area, top right, is intentional. The one thing this painting needs, and will have at some stage, is many small branches covering the surface of the painting. But that will come towards the end of the painting. The most interesting thing I think this shows is the layering in my work. I think layering is a massive part of my work, and even more so in the progression of this painting. So I shall continue now with some heavier, thicker paint using a palette knife. I often leave a painting for a few months whilst working on it. Having begun this painting a good few months ago, I've only recently just returned to it. One of the reasons I leave the painting for a few months is because I like the paint to completely dry. I also like the fact that I can reconsider the whole thing when I've left it for a little while. I can reconsider the composition, the surface, the drawing, all the different aspects to the picture before I then go and work on it again. As you can see, I've worked on this a little bit more in the last few days, having not worked on it for about 2 months. The first thing that I noticed, which I guess I wasn't happy with, was the painting, was the positioning of the tree, the trunk, in the centre. It just felt it didn't seem to be the right scale, almost, for the rest of the picture. One of the things I'm trying to avoid is to allow the centre trunk to dominate. But obviously it is one of the main focuses of the painting, and in which case it is probably going to be the most dominant thing. So I'm also contradicting myself, but I've got to be very careful. It isn't the only thing in the picture. Everything else is built around the centre and the trunk in the middle. So I've been thinking about that the last few days. The other thing I've also done is I've started to thicken the paint up, the surface of the paint. And this is very conscious. This is something I want in the picture. I want the painting to become very much more three-dimensional. That's what I'm currently working on.
I worked up the foliage on both sides of the main trunk. Went and did again, I went and did some more drawings, just to get the foliage, or have an idea about the foliage pretty clear in my mind. And the structure of the two trees on the left and the right, the two bushes, trees, left on the right. So I'm continuing to build up the surface, but as with all painting, when you get to this point in the painting starts to take on its own to a certain extent. And it's important that, for me, that I respond to that. Even though this remains a figurative image, I consciously make the decision to do drawings from outside and bring them back to the studio, so I am in fact removing myself from the subject. And so the subject starts to take on its own in the painting, rather than just being about what was in front of me in a literal sense. So I'm starting to reach that point now where the painting is coming back at me, more so than perhaps the subject itself. And it kind of begins to dictate the conclusion of the painting. And this is when it becomes quite exciting. Certain little moments within the painting appear, and I'm trying to follow them at the moment. And it may be a case that I'm actually quite close to completing the work. On the other hand, I'm not entirely sure about that. But so far there are things that I feel could lead me on and towards the finish line, as it were. I did some more drawing from the subject a few days ago and began to realise the painting, like many of my pictures, was a long way from being complete. And I think this is what happens when you work in front of a subject and then you come back to the studio and you make a painting from drawings. Because you're so removed from the subject, you have to allow for the painting to take on its own, really, which is what it began to do. But then I began to realise, however important the central trunk was in this particular painting, there was something else not right in the picture. It wasn't just about the central trunk, and it wasn't just about the red, and it's not just about the green in the painting. So I went back to the subject and did some drawings and realised that in front of the main central trunk was a small tree coming up and growing, and I felt that this almost divides up the composition in the way that I'd originally wanted with the other elements of the painting. So with all my painting, as with all my painting, I have to be honest, and if the tree was there, then I needed to put the tree in. So I did a series of drawings of the small tree, and in the last few days I've put the tree at the front. So obviously the picture starts to change a bit, but the original idea of a composition dividing up a square is becoming more apparent now through that extra tree at the front, and the emphasis not entirely just being on the main trunk in the middle. So I've been working on that, but I've decided now like all painting, I'm going to leave this again for some time. The reason being, I feel that the painting needs a bit of time to be left alone. I need the paint to completely dry. I want the paint to completely dry, and I just need a little bit of a distance almost from this picture, because there are so many different parts to it. I feel it's important I leave it now, which I will do for about 3 or 4 weeks. But this creates problems because it's at the end of the winter, this painting, and we're coming into spring and summer, and soon you probably won't be able to actually see the red or the green gate or the red garage in the distance on this particular subject. So because the leaves will open up and the whole picture will change completely, and in some ways that's quite a good thing really, because it makes me look closer at my original drawings, away from the subject. But we shall see. I shall leave it for a few weeks and then I shall go back to it, hopefully with a clearer mind. There is still a tremendous amount of work to do on the painting, and I think if I leave it, that amount of work will become clearer when I come back to it.
I won't work on this painting again. I worked on it probably the last time a month ago, and I've left it for about 3 weeks. Turned it round this morning with the view that I might work on it, but fully aware that the painting is reaching its conclusion, and this morning I feel it has reached its conclusion. I think there are 2 critical times when you make a painting: the start of the painting and the end of the painting. When is a painting finished? Well, I go by the rule the painting should tell you when it's finished, and you have to be open to that ending. If I'd felt like I wanted or needed, the painting needed me to work on it this morning, I would have done, but I just feel I've got to leave it. There's a critical point where you could go in and on into a painting, but sometimes it's not what you put down, it's what you don't put down. For me, the painting has concluded itself. It's telling me to stop. It has what I wanted it to do: an exploration into lines, into colour, into shapes, into light within this subject, on the edge of the wood, with the yellow leaves, the green, distant green gate, and of course the red garage in the middle. So the painting, as far as I can see, or I know, is now complete, and it's taken almost a year. If I was to go back to the woods today, those buds are just beginning to appear, ready for spring in a few weeks, just how they were when I worked on it this time last year. So here with the painting, an undecided title, Moment. Most likely it will include a colour in the title, more than likely the colour red. So clearly a starting point for me in this picture. I took this whole composition on because I was interested in that red from the distance. How did it relate to the 2 trees alongside and the vertical trunk in the middle? How did it relate? What does it say? What is it saying? I wanted to speak about these relationships, so I think the title will include the colour red, but for now I'm undecided, so I shall give that some more thought.
it's finished now.